Okay. Alex Harsley, Portrait of an Artist. Alex Harsley, 4th Street Photography Gallery photographer extraordinaire, videographer, artist, philosopher, mentor. Whatever Mr. Alex Harsley does, he does exceptionally well, and I might add, with distinction and unfaltering skill. I met the legendary Mr. Harsley on a picture-perfect day in April and found him sitting in front of his 4th Street photo gallery. A native South Carolinian, like Mr. Harsley, I was greeted heartily, then graciously ushered into his iconic Museum of the Past. With a career that spans more than 50 years, Mr. Harsley is the heart, soul, and indeed the eyes of Minority Photographers, Inc., a nonprofit art organization he founded in 1971. In 1973, he opened the 4th Street Photo Gallery, a storefront at 67 East 4th Street, befittingly located in New York's colorful East Village. Situated between Bowery and 2nd Avenue, 4th Street Photo Gallery is a welcoming oasis of creativity for New York's multifaceted community of emerging as well as established photographers. Today, this salon continues to serve as an open forum, nurturing, assisting, and even guiding the careers of artists in various disciplines. It's true. Alex Harsley was born on Rock Hill, South Carolina in 1938. Out of wedlock, a condition he says gave him an innate ability to quickly differentiate between the very good and the very bad things in life. In 1948, at age 11, Alex arrived in New York and has become a resident ever since. Becoming a photographer was never his childhood dream, and he admits that he did not fall in love with the art of imagery until well into his adult life. He worked a number of survival jobs, but it wasn't until he began working as a messenger, picking up and delivering artwork for several photo shops, that he felt photography seriously pulling at his heartstrings. He was working in a camera shop when a stranger approached him and offered to sell him a camera for $15. He bought the camera on a whim at a time when he was searching for something to do with his life. Something he could love doing forever. Little did he know then that the camera he had purchased would lead him to that place in life. New York's vast and vibrant melting pot became his preferred landscapes and subjects, and an endless canvas of inspiration to Mr. Harsley. For decades, he has photographed the gamut from gritty scenes of life in Alphabet City on Manhattan's Lower East Side to glimpses of bygone snow-covered Times Square, Coney Island, circa 1959, and uptown to the indelible images of faces in the streets of Harlem, the Black Mecca. He has captured it all. As a photographer, videographer, and artist, Mr. Harsley insists that his body of work reflects a constant search for the unknown, adding that he likes to think of his art as a vehicle of sorts, propelling him through the many adventures of life. Photography is a medium that embraced me and forced me to challenge myself, Harsley states matter-of-factly. My Methodist upbringing, he continues, has always been a part of me, and as such, I've always believed that if I'm going to do something, I have to do it the best I can. Harsley took the art of photography seriously, learning everything he possibly could about the medium. He studied privately with Dr. Lloyd E. Varden, who was then an adjunct professor of photographic science at Columbia University in New York City. Harsley considers Varden, who specialized in color photography, a genius, and over time has acquired a collection of books authored by Varden on the subjects of visuals and vision. Over the years, Harsley has photographed more than his share of athletes, politicians, artists, scholars, entertainers, and of course everyday people. During the 1960s, he found himself surrounded by folk like Bill Safire and others who were trying to get Richard Nixon elected President of the United States. He photographed a young Muhammad Ali riding a horse, Don King, Miles Davis, Abbey Lincoln, Amiri Baraka, and a long list of entertainers who have graced the stage at the world-famous Apollo Theater in Harlem. In 1959, he was hired as the photographer for the New York County District Attorney's Office. In 1961, he was drafted by the U.S. Army and sent to training camp in Anniston, Alabama. Reflecting, he said, "I was in my uniform, so I thought it was okay to sit in the front of the bus. It was like walking back into my childhood in South Carolina." During the course of his illustrious career, Harsley has had numerous solo exhibitions of his works, including A Visual History of the Lower East Side East Village. 2014, Alex Harsley, The Comeback of Muhammad Ali. Also 2014, 50 Years of Fine Art Images. 2012, Dualities. 2005, 44 Years of New York. 2004, and Patchworks, 2002, among others. His public collection is included in the Smithsonian Institution, National Museum of African American History and Culture, Washington, D.C. In 2000, he was commissioned by Health and Hospital Corporation, Woodhull Medical Center, Brooklyn, New York. He has participated in numerous group exhibitions and collaborated with other recognized photographers such as Professor Richard Martin, George Martin, and Don Hogan Charles, the first black photographer hired by the New York Times. Mr. Harsley has also crossed paths and became friends with Michael Richards, a 37-year-old African-American sculptor whose conceptual art was inspired by the black arts movement of the 1970s. Richards, who was killed in the 9/11 World Trade Center terror attacks, is remembered mostly for his 1999 Tar Baby versus St. Sebastian, a sculpture of a valiant pilot being pierced by airplanes, depicting the Tuskegee Airmen, brave African-American military aviators who were later used in experiments with syphilis. Harsley concedes that in recent years he has come to terms with photographing the good, the bad, and the ugly. He will always be a photographer first, but now he spends most of his time working on film and video projects and experimenting with new art forms. As for Mr. Harsley, he no doubt has the best of all worlds. He is a photographer who has spent more than 50 years doing what he loves to do. Appropriately, on the very day I was interviewing Mr. Harsley, Mr. Alex Rowe, artistic director of Metropolitan Playhouse, The American Legacy, an award-winning theater company in Alphabet City, came by and presented Mr. Harsley with a framed certificate that reads, "Thank you for sharing your East Side story and helping us connect our community to the past and the present through art." The end.
Let's see, see if I can read. Does this feel close enough? No, huh? Yes, is that right? Photographic sensitivity, latent image and development. Primary processes. Two opposing theories of the latent image exist. One, according to the silver halide theory, the latent image is formed by a change in the silver halide itself, i.e., by the formation of metallic silver, so-called photosilver. More will be said later as to how far this photosilver is equivalent to the latent image. 2. According to Renwick's theory, at least in highly sensitive emulsions, preformed silver particles are changed by light from a sol to a gel form, and in this way, nuclei for development are obtained. Furthermore, F. Weigert has built up a Miceli theory of the latent image from his experiments on induced optical anisotropy. anisotropy, according to which the latent image must be formed from physically changed micelles, dense yet amorphous aggregates of molecules of all constituents of the emulsion, the original silver dye, silver sulfide, and the silver halide itself. The change on exposure to light, which represents the spatial orientation of the micelle elements, corresponds simultaneously to an increased catalytic activity towards the developer. The author cannot agree with Weigard's theory for two reasons. 1. The spectral sensitivity of a silver halide corresponds fairly accurately to its spectral absorption as shown by Hughes and Muehlendijk and by Toy and Edgerton. 2. The author has been able to prove that desensitizing with chromic acid does not alter the spectral distribution of the sensitivity at all, although certainly in this way the primary silver micelles are destroyed. There is also direct proof for the existence of the photosilver. A. According to Toy and Harrison, the primary process of photoconductivity of silver bromide is comparable throughout to its photographic effect. B. In the experiments made by Shepard and Vencelau on the photovoltaic effect of silver-silver bromide electrodes, it was proved that photoelectrons and bromine atoms are set free synergically. The results may be considered as a good confirmation of the assumed process, which is followed by the photographically important reaction. C. The first measurements on the spectral absorption of silver halide crystals were reported in 1930 by Hilsch and Pohl. Comparison between the alkali halides and the silver halides showed that the former gave moderately sharp but continuous bands. It is noteworthy that not the long wavelength limits, but the maxima proper frequency of these bands are represented by energy equations. Our values agree well with those of Hilsch and Pohl for the alkali salts. With the silver halides, the conditions are much more complicated. The maximum or proper frequencies are not sharp, but are barely distinguishable. According to Hilsch and Pohl, with alkali halides, for each halide a single band is obtained, which is separated from the absorption spectrum of the crystal lattice by a wide region free from absorption. A single reaction product corresponds here to a single absorption process. In the first case, this product will be formed from simple, neutral alkali atoms. According to the classical dispersion formula, the number of color centers can be computed and compared with the absorbed light quanta. In this way, Smakula obtained values between 0.6 and 0.9 as the yield in alkali halide crystals. Hilsch and Pohl found values of 0.4 and 0.33 for silver chloride and silver bromide, and noted that these values approximate the quantum equivalent in the exposure region of the latent image. The investigations on photoconductivity, photoelectric effect, and light absorption of crystals and of the photoproduct all lead to the same conclusion. The primary photochemical process in the absorption of light by silver halide crystals, even in the region of the normal latent image, consists in the release of electrons from bromide ions and the acceptance of these electrons by silver ions. The course of this decomposition has not yet been completely explained. As shown, and as seen in Table 2, the simple energy equations are insufficient to indicate the absorption regions in the case of the silver halides. Developability. Relation between photochemical and photographic sensitivity. According to earlier results, photochemical sensitivity does not bear a definite simple relationship to photographic sensitivity. Otherwise, the same light absorption in the same silver halide should always give the same photographic effect. This is not the case, however. Two silver halide emulsions, which contain exactly the same amount of the same silver halide, identical in grain size and dispersity, may show considerable difference in photographic sensitivity. In relation to this is Triveli's proof of the statistical distribution of developability among equally exposed grains of the same size. Furthermore, with X-rays, each absorbed quantum makes one grain developable. The absorption of such an enormous quantum causes decomposition of the atomic nuclei, setting free many electrons and light quanta. An absorption yield of up to 1,000 silver atoms per quantum was found by Eggert and Nodak. Such a large aggregation of silver atoms appears in every case to provide a nucleus for development. On the other hand, with ultraviolet and visible light, where not more than one silver atom is found for each light quantum absorbed, the number of atoms required to make a grain developable depends on the state of the grain and particularly on the so-called ripening nuclei. Ripening nuclei. The importance of ripening nuclei has been discussed by Eder and Lupo Kramer. Usually it is assumed that they are caused by a slight reduction to silver, which agrees with Lupo Kramer's discovery of desensitizing bichromic acid. Some observations of Shepard, Triveli, and Whiteman make this appear doubtful. They found that the sensitizing nuclei showed much greater resistance to chromic acid, etc., than did the latent image for the same emulsion. In agreement with this, W. Clark showed that a preliminary exposure greatly increased the desensitizing effect with chromic acid. This difference in behavior of ripening nuclei and latent image must be attributed either to different substances or to different states of combination. The marked dependence of the formation of ripening nuclei on the kind of gelatin was shown by Shepard. In a fairly extensive investigation on the manufacture of gelatin, Shepard and Hudson found that A. Certain kinds of gelatin were sensitized by the addition of ethyl or petroleum ether extracts obtained from hides or the seeds of certain plants. B. Substances were found in all these extracts which precipitated out silver sulfide from ammoniacal silver oxide solutions. C. Pure substances containing sulfur, such as thiocarbamide, thiosulfate, and especially mustard oil, also showed this sensitizing ability. Shepard concluded that the ripening nuclei must consist in part of silver sulfide. R. Luther and Menkenberg independently discovered the sensitizing ability of silver sulfide nuclei. Later it was also found that suitable quantities of silver selenide and telluride can form sensitizing nuclei, while Leisgang showed that silver phosphate apparently has this property. The possibility that silver sulfide and silver sensitized jointly was discussed earlier by Shepard and Punnett with the U.S. patent number 1,623,499. The silver value. Following Schmidt and Pretzsch